it's ego. We've got to deal with our ego states. What's giving us that thought that we base a man's value on his income? What is it in a man that's making him think that he can't accept the help from his woman?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we've got to deal with those mental states. We got to deal with those thoughts that we have. We've got to come out of that, because again, it's about vulnerability.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to be strong and nobody wants to be vulnerable.
Good people, what's up, what's good? I'm blessed to be your host, Caleb Smith. Today we have a very special guest here, man. He is my personal therapist. He's been doing great work throughout Atlanta and abroad for a while now, man. You're talking about decades at this point. This conversation is going to be much needed. Black Men's Mental Health Month, which is real big right now, you know, for us discussing our mental health and also talking with it, not with people that's just saying stuff, but actual licensed professionals who look like us as well and have our best interests at heart. Marcus Jones, I appreciate you pulling up today, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, man. Marcus is very extensive in his background. Again, Marcus, he's been doing this for decades. So starting off, what got you involved when it comes to therapy, when it comes to mental health, everything in this space? What got you involved in this?
So, man, I didn't know anything about mental health. In fact, when I graduated high school, when I was a child, I'll start there, I was diagnosed with ADHD.
Wow.
I didn't know what it was. Didn't understand what it was. I just know my mother took me to this white man who gave me a prescription for medication. He seen me for a few minutes. He wrote this prescription for medication, and I remember we sat in a car.
Wow.
My mother ripped up the prescription, and she said, "You know what? You're gonna do this without it. We're gonna try to work with this without it." And so, you know, I struggled, you know, from childhood up until adulthood. I didn't know what I was gonna do after high school, and so I ended up getting this job at a hospital, a medical hospital, and I was what you call a sitter. To technical term is patient attendant, but we just sat with patients to make sure that they were safe. And so one day they asked me, they said, Marcus, we need you to go down to the psychiatric unit. And I was like, wait, what's a psychiatric unit? And then the black woman at the time told me, she said, well, you'll find out when you get there. And so I sure did find out when I got there what it was. And so once I start seeing the behaviors of people on that unit, I got more interested in what would cause us, what would trigger our brains to actually operate in such a manner. And so I just started to feed and hunger for more knowledge on that aspect of human psychology and the human psyche. And I was just really interested in it. And so I just sort of took off from there, and 22 years later, here I am.
22 years, man, that is a long time, 2 decades. To your point, though, ADHD, right? I think that so many young black men get diagnosed with that at a very young age. And, you know, when we break down our school system and black boys basically being institutionalized from day one of how to fit into a classroom, do you think that our black boys, especially our black boys, are diagnosed prematurely by the white social structure, if you will, when it comes to ADHD at a very young age?
I think oftentimes our black boys are misdiagnosed as opposed to diagnosed too early. They're misdiagnosed at times. The reason I say that is because culturally what we understand is that children have different behaviors in how they engage. And it's based off how we're raised. When you have a young black boy in a school system where the teachers are mostly women, white male, and they don't understand the behavior or how to interact with that child. The child is then looked like as if they're a problem or issue in the school. And so then what we do is we pathologize every child that we don't understand or we don't get their behaviors, and so we have to take it and put a label to it. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with diagnosing, but we put a label to it, right? And we say, well, they need this. And so through their school career, what happens is there's these things that they're trying, and they're like, well, we don't know what to do. We don't know how to, and don't get me wrong, there are some students in the school who are accurately diagnosed with a diagnosis, but there's a lot of students who are misdiagnosed. And there's oftentimes a diagnosis that's commonly resorted to. So a lot of students are diagnosed with ADHD, but they may really be experiencing bipolar disorder. ADHD can look like bipolar disorder. There's a portion of, we pay a lot of attention to the attention deficit and the hyperactivity of ADHD. But one of the symptomologies, and a common symptomology in ADHD, is emotion dysregulation. The fluctuation of the emotion experience. There could be a fluctuation of the emotion experience in ADHD, where there's this hyperactive activity, and then there's this low activity of depressed moods. What's bipolar disorder? Two polar opposite mood states, right? There's this high state of what we call mania, and then the low state of which is depression. And so when diagnosing bipolar disorder, you either do bipolar 1, which is commonly or mostly mania, or you do bipolar 2, which is commonly or mostly depression. And so I say that to say that commonly that there's a lot of misdiagnosis. There's a lot of misdiagnosis from the perspective that there might be another diagnosis, or there may not need to be a diagnosis at all. That child just needs to be more understood.
Wow. Understanding our children, how can we start doing just a better job of that, right, Marcus? Of sometimes the parents, which we already know is all by design, mom might be working 80 hours a week. And if that young black boy, if he does have a father, God willing, he might be working 2-3 jobs as well. And then when they get that report from the teacher saying, well, JJ, he's bad, and put him on these pills, put him on this Adderall. And that's like an easy fix. I don't have to worry about putting in the actual work. How do we properly nurture our children and actually be patient with them throughout that process?
Time and adjustment. And I know that parents have to work. They have to support their child, pay the bills and things like that. What we have to understand though is when a parent is not emotionally available, that causes what we call attachment ruptures, right? Most of the time, the attachment rupture happens when the child doesn't have a relationship with the father. Most of the time, the relationship a child has with their mother is implicit. We're in them for 9 months. And a lot of times it's a natural connection. The relationship with the father is the relationship where a child learns the basic developmental task that we call trust. They learn that task of trusting other people. When a father is emotionally unavailable, what happens is that child learns not to trust other people. Wow. So then we so much as to being humans, we so much want to get in relationships. We get in a relationship with the person, and ultimately, we don't know how to trust that other person. So this could explain as to why men commit infidelity, engage in domestic violence, and behaviors such as that, because they withdraw from being able to express or give put any sort of emotional, any sort of a language around their emotion, because they don't want to feel vulnerable. They don't trust anybody with their vulnerability because they miss that basic developmental task of learning how to trust other people. And so my recommendation is to spend more time with your children. Spend it. I believe it starts at home. If you've got to spend a lot more time with your child and get to know your child, get to know what their thoughts are and things like that, and be more impressionable, be the main impression on your child. When they go to school, the truth of the matter is that teachers have a major impact. But at school, more of the impact that your child is going to have is with their peers as opposed to their teachers.
Vulnerability, peer pressure, we can go so many different ways. Being vulnerable, especially with young Black men, when we start to develop into fathers and grandfathers, uncles, all of those things, how can we start being more vulnerable? Because the one thing that I can say as a Black man, unfortunately, sometimes when we do open up, when we are vulnerable, those things can be thrown back into your face. So I think that so many of us, we're just scarred from even sharing things because it's like, I can't show any signs of weakness. How can we be more open, more vulnerable, but also being vulnerable to the right people? Because it could be very dangerous sharing sensitive information with people who don't have our best interests at heart, unfortunately.
It's learning a level of diplomacy, exercising balance, and knowing the people that you could trust. But at some point, you got to open yourself up and take a risk to trust somebody. And knowing those people that are in your life that you trust, being intentional with the people that you interact and communicate with, right? Think about something. We have such a difficult time, as men do, we have such a difficult time with vulnerability, but then we get in these relationships, right? We enter these relationships and we get on our knee and we tell this woman that we want to marry her, and then we marry her, and then it's, how do you enter a relationship with somebody you don't trust?
Wow.
You enter into a relationship with somebody you can't even trust to hold your vulnerability or your vulnerable space. We've got to realize, we've got to reconceptualize vulnerability. Vulnerability is a power. It's actually a power. It's not a weakness. If you're able to show yourself those areas of vulnerability, right? And if you're able to be truthful about those areas of vulnerability, it'll make you that much more in the process of growth. It'll put you in that much more process of growth. You'll see those areas where you may be lacking, and you won't strengthen the areas that you don't see or that you don't admit that need to be strengthened. It's always good to have somebody who's on the outside that you could have that honest conversation with. Somebody you could express to. Sometimes it's, if we just say things, the power of the tongue is so powerful, because sometimes if we could just say things, it'll help relieve the inner stress that we carry. We cannot continue to suppress our emotional experience. When we suppress our emotional experience, it not only has mental effects, but it has physical effects. We still wondering why Black men are experiencing viruses, cancers, and diseases and things like that more than our counterparts, or when we experience them, we have a more severe experience of those diseases and cancers. What research says that the more stressed that you are, your body actually hoards that excessive amount of stress hormone.
Wow.
Right? What we do know is that stress hormone, cortisol, controls blood pressure, sleep rate responses, your heart rate, inflammatory cells that are released in your body whenever cortisol is released from the HPA axis. It releases inflammatory cells, which we associate commonly with more risk of disease, or virus, or cancer. And so hoarding your emotional experience and encapsulating that experience without release or expression is detrimental to your mental health.
Wow, that's heavy right there. Speaking about the stress levels, I think about people like Jackie Robinson, right, where it said he even developed diabetes from stress. Reggie Jackson, he just went viral, Mr. October, about dealing with all of the stress during segregation before he played for the Oakland A's and the Yankees, like in the minor leagues. He talked about all of that stress. I think about our fathers, our grandfathers, who grew up during that time, right, where you had black versus white basically, and our people had to go to different water fountains in different parts of town, and you dealt with people getting lynched, all of that. What impact, or I would say trauma, generational trauma, do you think that caused on us now of being those sons of those fathers who had to deal with all of that stress?
Let me tell you, from a standpoint of epigenetics, this is what I believe.
Wow, yeah.
We carry the unresolved trauma and emotional experience of our ancestors.
Wow.
They ask, why does a black man look angry, or why do we look so tense? Why do you feel a mood whenever things are going well, and all of a sudden you feel this mood that overcomes you, and you start to experience this uncomfortable mood or this distress all of a sudden? I believe it's because we carry the trauma and the unresolved emotions of our ancestors. Not only that, but we still today are dealing with racism.
Yeah. Yep.
Not only are we dealing with racism, we're dealing with people who are racist and still are denying that they are racist.
Facts. Yeah.
And so we're carrying that stress. And so that stress affects us. And so the world tells us that we somehow have to ignore it or just deal with it. Don't say anything. Just leave it alone. Just become numb to it. And so you can't become numb to it.
That's
it's
right.
not healthy to be numb to it. It's not healthy to be indifferent. It's all right to experience an emotion.
Yeah.
Our emotional experience is natural to us. You use we see emotions. From a overall human standpoint, we see emotions as this experience that we should avoid or somehow do away with or somehow get rid of. Emotions help us to create meaning and interpretation of our life experience. If you know how to use emotion. Yeah. If you could take and your emotion and use it as a tool or as a guide. Oftentimes we act out of emotion because we're just responding to what our brain tells our body what to do.
Oof. And you even got Sid saying, I feel it. Hey, this is how a typical session is. No, I love this because being numb, I think that so many of us, myself included, have conditioned ourselves on being strong and knowing I got to lead. And, especially for all the young black men who would be tuned in, who are in like leadership roles, you feel like I can't be weak. I can't show any type of emotion because I have so many people watching me, right? How do we try to properly show emotion, but then also be careful about not being too emotional? Because sometimes I can hear certain women say sometimes he's too emotional. So like, how can we make sure that, okay, I'm trying to be open, but not too emotional too?
We have to reconceptualize the emotional experience at the intersection of emotion and masculinity. We've got to redefine what masculinity is.
For sure.
We often say that women are emotional, but men are emotional too.
Yeah.
Everybody's emotional.
Yeah.
we all carry an emotion experience. It's just how we do it, right? We look at anger as this non-emotion, right?
Yeah.
And so anger is absolutely an emotion.
That's facts.
Oftentimes we use anger as anger becomes this micro emotion or this secondary emotion. What I mean by that is we're angry because we're hurt. We're angry because we're in pain. We're angry because we're sad. We're angry because we're frustrated. We're angry because we're angry. If we're able to start changing our language and how we see and view emotion, we could people will start to be well balanced at emotion regulation and regulating their emotions. Think about this. anger, frustration,
Yeah.
disappointment.
Mm.
You're different when you are angry
Yeah.
versus when you're disappointed versus when you're frustrated.
Yeah.
If you could really put language to the emotion, oftentimes we use anger as a catch-all. And it's just, I'm angry because of this. I'm angry because of that. And so then we act out of anger.
Yeah.
Just think if you start changing your language to, you know what, that made me feel frustrated. You might not punch a hole in the wall. That made me disappointed. As opposed to cussing somebody out, that disappointment may motivate you to do better. And so how we put language to our internal experience could ultimately change the trajectory of our behaviors.
Some heavy stuff right there too, man. And our minds, our language of how we even communicate, how we feel, what we think. Again, I go back to the school system, right? I think that Black people, we don't talk enough about whitewashing history and how that impacts our minds, self-confidence, because I firmly believe this of growing up in school, you know, when you take gifted classes, unfortunately, you and all your friends that's Black, they're in the general ed stuff. But then myself, I remember Zay, he had told me he was taking gifted classes. You walk in and unfortunately you're the only Black kid. And then on top of that, you're taught, well, Black kids have to be nerdy. So then, you know, if you walk in wearing a gold chain, you wearing bracelets, a baseball cap, sneakers, you don't fit that mold either. So then it's like, okay, how do I try to find who I am? What affects, man, when it comes to us learning from day one that this guy is the father of psychology, it's a white man, or this guy is the father of this type of medicine, it's a white man, has on a young Black mind, especially a young Black man's mind?
It is time that we, and I'm actually working on this myself, and it's part of my goal, but it's time that we start to reconceptualize and rework mental health to fit within the Black community. We have to redefine mental health for ourselves.
Yeah.
There was a psychologist by the name of Dr. Earl Joseph White. He was a Black psychologist who said this, that it's time for us to reconceptualize mental health for ourselves.
Wow.
Dr. Francis Cress Welsing is a Black psychologist who was also a proponent of reconceptualizing mental health.
Yeah.
Does anybody know about Dr. Maxie Maltzby, who created the theoretical base of rational behavioral therapy? So it's time that we start to relook at mental health and as it relates to the Black community, because most of the things that we learn is from a Eurocentric point of view.
Yeah.
When we're in school, most of the things we learn is from a Eurocentric point of view.
For sure.
The therapeutic interventions that we learn as therapists is from a Eurocentric point of view. And it's now time for us to start reconceptualizing that framework to fit within the text of the Black community.
Bingo. That's it. How do we try to properly dismantle that Eurocentric purview and then change that to a more, I would say, Afrocentric, where it's more thinking about Black people first and how, you know, we can cater towards Black men when it comes towards therapy and things of that sort?
The first thing from a global standpoint, cultural competence. From a Black diaspora standpoint, we got to appreciate who we are and where we come from.
For sure.
Oftentimes we've bought into these archetypes and conceptualizations. Right. I was on there's a on Instagram, there's a site and they posted this video of there's a couple of Black males who had robbed this white family, and there were some comments, and I always go into the comments because the comments interest me. And so there were several comments. One person said, "That's why they lock their doors when we come around."
See.
We're buying into the archetype and conceptualization as to we can't pathologize everything and make everything that's just Black people. You can't criminalize a whole community. Everybody, every culture has criminals. And so that's the one thing we have to do is we have to come out of this internal oppression. It's an internal oppression.
Wow.
And so it's mentally when you give up on trying to fight and trying to see yourself as something, right? And it's a common thing that this is a common thing that we all do as human beings. Research says that the average human being thinks more negative than they do positive.
Wow.
It's not because we're negative. It's because we're trying to protect ourselves. We want to protect ourselves. A lot of times we will sit on the floor of low self-esteem because we fear the fall of our own self-confidence.
Sheesh, that's a bar.
And so we've got to get ourselves into a place where it's okay to take the risk to think confident about yourself, to think that you're more than, to think that you're brilliant. And we've got to start thinking like that about our own community.
Man, self-esteem and buying into the archetype, man. So on that point, I just feel like, again, that white supremacy has done a number on our minds. And from knowing on how we think of ourselves, how do we try to get white people, I would say, in our minds, psychologically out of this or off of this same pedestal of thinking that they're above us? Because even that comment, that bothers me. That's why they lock their doors. So all of us are criminals. How do we try to break down thinking like that?
We've got to be confident in who we are and in our own community.
That's right.
Nobody can ever conceptualize your worth.
Right.
Your value and your worth is the sum total of how you see and perceive yourself. Right? And then it's your behaviors and outward interaction that then gets people to see you how they then want to see you.
Right.
Right?
Right.
People always, everybody makes judgments about everybody. There's a 7-11 rule. The first 7 seconds you meet somebody, you make 11 inferences about it. Right? Wow. Your behavior and how you behave and how you interact with people is the show. That's the outwardness of how they see you. They built computers after the human being, right? The tower is the brain, right? The monitor is the display. It's our behavior. It's it's what people see in us. We've got to start being more confident. We've got to start being a lot more connected with each other, and we've got to start showing a lot more pride in who we are as a people.
For sure. Black man's confidence. Marcus, right now, that whole space is real nasty. So it's this thing called the manosphere, which I know you probably already heard of this before, where young men, man, they'll be scrolling on YouTube trying to learn how to pick up girls, how to treat women. And it's coming, unfortunately, from guys that you could tell growing up weren't cool. And then they finally got a little bit of money, I guess, and they hit the gym a little bit. And now it's women are this, women are that. This is how you get women. For young black men, how do we properly engage with black women and not from this mind state of women are hoes and all this other things, but instead properly date a woman, properly love a woman? How do we go about that process?
We have got to stop. We have got to stop taking out our trauma and insecurities
for sure
on black women.
Yep.
It has been this has been an absolute historical issue in the black community. Yeah. Right? From slavery all the way up. We black women have been at the center of the black man's frustration and anger. Yeah. And so the first thing we've got to do is we've got to deal with our traumas, our insecurities, and our unresolved emotions. And then we've got to start reconceptualize how we see our black women. Now we got to start, we have to start respecting black women for who they are. And now we got to respect them for where they are in life. And research shows that they have edged black men when it comes to education, when it comes to their increase in professional jobs and things like that. And so we've got to start respecting black women. And we've got to deal with our own insecurities and trauma, because over time we've taken it out on black women, and we've used black women, whether it was from molestation, rape, domestic violence, to sexualizing and exposing them in our music videos.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. And so we've made them this. We've thought of it and made them this commodity, and we've made it cool, right?
Yeah.
And so growing up, uncles and dads and them, that was a conversation they had. Hey, you ain't with the honeys, you ain't doing up with the honeys. And so what they was building in us was two things. One, how to treat to treat and disrespect black women, but then two, they was instilling in us sexual dependency.
Hey, you talking about that a lot. Sexual discipline, man. That's a real big thing, Marcus, because, man, like when I see guys, especially if you're like late 20s, and it's guys, man, addicted to porn.
Yep.
They're on Twitter. They're constantly masturbating. And honestly, I say masturbating in women too, because they'll be thinking about their favorite porn star when they sleeping with their girlfriend or sleeping with a random girl. How do men practice or should go about practicing sexual discipline? Because I try to tell guys, a woman likes a mystery. And I'm not saying being closed up, any of that, of course not. But like when you come out trying to sleep with her instantly and you trying to be all up, that's not it. So how do we practice better sexual discipline as black men?
So again, when it comes to the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, is a manual that carries diagnosis. It's what most practitioners in my field use for sort of like our Bible for diagnosing. And so that manual still has not recognized porn addiction and sex addiction. What research has shown, though, is that porn addiction and sex addiction are actually harder addictions to overcome than substance addiction.
I can believe that.
Right?
Yeah.
Research has also shown that porn addiction and sex addiction can raise your dopamine levels to a place at the same level as if you've used meth.
Wow.
Why am I saying all this? I'm saying this is because porn addiction and sex addiction are used like drugs. They're used to overcome and to deal with different emotions. Just as somebody could feel through food, a lot of men feel through sex. That's how they deal with stress. One of the things that we always think about is when somebody's depressed or stressed out, they can't engage in or have a sexual interaction. That's not always true, actually, right? When it comes to sexual interaction being symptomology of depression or major depressive disorder or any other stress disorder, it's the same as sleep. You can either oversleep or you can undersleep. It's the same as eating or your appetite. You can either overeat or undereat. Right? You could either have an increased amount of sex, or it could diminish your sexual activity. It could be either or. A lot of times that's how men deal with their experiences. The other thing is when it comes to women talk about sexual women who have been abused. A lot of women discuss their sexual trauma and experiences because we have a platform for that. I'm not saying all women. Some women keep it because it's a thing of, the sad thing is that they've been a victim of sexual assault, rape, and things like that. We have a place for women to do that. Man, we don't. In fact, we don't even recognize it, right? When you was 15,
she was just older.
She was just older. When you was 15 years old, you had sex with that 23, 27-year-old woman. That was bro, I knocked that down. That was I'm cool. No, you wasn't, because in fact, your brain can't even conceptualize how to control a euphoric experience like sex until you're 25 years old.
And that makes sense, though. That makes sense. Wow. So now this woman who
who led you into this sexual experience, who more than likely controlled the full sexual experience.
That's true. Yep.
Now what you're doing is replicating her behavior. There was a Belgian psychoanalyst by the name of Sandor Florenzi, who coined the term identification with the aggressor. Is when the victim identifies with the behaviors and the power dynamic of the aggressor. Wow. And so that's what happens. That's what happens a lot of times with victims is when children, as they grow older and with child and adolescent sex offenders, they talk about this all the time. When a child offends another child, most of the time research says that child has been sexually abused at some point. Wow. Well, in some manner, it's like that the same way with us men, right? Whether it was with somebody older and it was a consensual sexual experience, or it was somebody that forced us into it. How we deal with it is we identify with the power dynamic of the aggressor. And so as we get older, we start to engage in sexual interaction. What does sexual interaction do? Sexual interaction speaks to a lot of things. We feel power, we feel control, and not only do we feel those things, it also makes us feel good. Wow. So why not do it to get rid of an emotion, or not deal with an emotion, or try to escape an emotion? How do we not sexualize? How do we not continue to hypersexualize our women? We have to start being able to process through our emotions and regulate those emotionals, and regulate our emotional experience.
Man, that was a word right there, because instantly I thought about two people. R. Kelly, as we know, who grew up, he was sexualized at a very young age. And then, of course, those same practices get passed on to younger people as well. And also Ray J. Ray J's interview with Shannon Sharp 2 weeks ago, it went viral. They had a great conversation, but he spoke about how when he was only 15, he was sleeping with a grown woman who was 34, 35. And he was saying, even in that moment where Shannon, he was trying to tell him, she took advantage. And Ray was like, nah, it was cool. It was cool. But if that was a 34-year-old man and a 15-year-old girl, it'll be viewed completely differently. For us as Black men, what do you think makes it so hard for us to just admit that, nah, I wasn't just knocking her down, I was taking advantage of? Why is that so hard for us just to admit? Because Ray J, that was 20 plus years ago, and he's still saying, nah, I'm good, but clearly that impacted him, because I think that's where you get the Kim K sex tape. Yes. That's why right now he's always cheating on his wife, Princess, because he has no sexual discipline. Just again, why can't we just admit that, man, I was taken advantage of? Because
it's a level of weakness and vulnerability.
Wow.
And we don't want to expose that what we see as weakness. We don't want to feel vulnerable. But see, we don't understand that that's the strength of vulnerability, though.
For sure.
If you can admit that this thing created this monster in your mind, or these thought patterns in your mind, if you can admit that, that'll make you a lot more stronger, because now you can deal with it. If we don't deal with the demons in our mind, it just grows, right? Yeah. The serpent in Genesis, God removed the legs from the serpent, right? And so now if God removed the legs from the serpent, he crawls on his belly. He's on his belly because he's docile. And the only legs now that the serpent has to stand on is the two that we give it. And so we're giving legs to these thoughts and these thought patterns, and we don't want to deal with them. And so instead, we just allow them to run through our brain. We just allow ourselves to have these thoughts that seep into our brain and paint this picture for us. And it paints this picture for us. And so that's what's wrong now is we don't want to deal with it. So we just allow, the thoughts are going to come. You can't stop your thoughts. There's nothing you can do to stop thoughts that come into your mind. There's a duality to man. We have positive, we have negative thoughts. And oftentimes life experience, and when bad things happen, it feeds those negative thought patterns that we have. And so instead of admitting where we're vulnerable, we just give power to those negative thoughts.
It's good stuff. We got black men scrolling on social media, and one of the biggest topics is seeing black women, not all, of course, but some saying, my man has to be 6'4", he got to make not even six figures no more. Some saying 250K plus, which is like the 1% of the 1%, basically. And he has to have all of these qualifications at the age between 25 to 30. However, those same black men that's in the comments, they're probably working 2 jobs, probably working manual labor jobs, probably went to college, but most people, unfortunately, in today's economy, they don't use their degrees, right?
Yeah.
For black men, what type of pressure could that put on scrolling and seeing, dang, she's beautiful, but I don't qualify for her? And constantly I'm being told I'm not doing good enough, but I see all the dope boys, they traveling, they getting to the money, but I'm over here going to work every day and I don't feel like I'm enough. What impact does that have on our black man's psychology?
It can create a level of low self-esteem. It creates this level of low self-esteem. So then what happens in turn is so nobody sees my low self-esteem, I get to a place of being a hubris, or I have this overinflated ego, and then I start engaging in a certain behavior, and calling myself an alpha male because I want to look strong, right? Because ultimately, what we understand is the reason that our black women say those things is because they want to be protected. Our black women don't feel protected. Let me get a man 6'4" who makes a lot of money.
Quote unquote alpha man. Alpha
Correct.
Male.
You're alpha man. I hate the ordinal personification of outright because I dislike it because one of Dr. Umar talks about alpha man, and he and I agree on a lot of things, but I hate when he talks about that because I think that it's this over. I think that it's this overinflated. I think it's just this overinflated personification to really hide the real vulnerabilities and the insecurities of our community. And we start to create these ordinal personifications that does nothing but increase the low self-esteem of the guys who don't feel like they are. It's so our women want to feel protected. So that's why they say all of those things, right? And so then we're like, you know what? I don't think I can meet all those standards, but I'm I don't, that's not me. That's who I am. That's not. And so wherever we are, we have this overinflated sense of ego to block, because we don't want nobody to see that we have low self-esteem. We don't want nobody to see that that's who. So then all of a sudden we have this overinflated ego. Instead of having the actual conversation, we say, "Oh man, y'all black women, y'all just creating this fairy tale. Y'all just creating this dream. Y'all just want to deal with a white man because we don't want to. Because what we feel is this sense of insecurity, and those standards create a sense of insecurity among a lot of men, because there's not many men that are 6'4", 6'5", making rare. 250K.
You talking
In
about
fact,
a professional
the average
athlete.
Black man don't even make that much.
I know.
Studies show that the average Black man make below 50 grand a year.
Wow. Yeah.
So it creates a level of low self-esteem for the Black man.
Low self-esteem, man. I love where this conversation is just flowing, because I think about our Black women in turn as well. I think about DC Youngfly, his wife, unfortunately, who passed about getting cosmetic surgery, right? And we have so many Black women who are trying to get breast implants, BBLs for sure, tummy tucks, all of those things, because us as Black men, when we're scrolling that Explore page, I can hit not interested 30,000 times, and I'm still gonna get OnlyFans girls content on that Explore page. And women, they see men liking that stuff. They see them commenting, and they want to look like Jada. Like now, girls, Marcus, literally point at pictures of their favorite influencer, Jada Waiter. I want to look exactly like her. Ari, exactly like her. And now all these girls, unfortunately, at the clubs and stuff, are starting to look exactly alike. Self-esteem wise, what impact has cosmetic surgery and paired with social media, I would say, has had on our Black women?
Let me say this. First thing is, I believe the Black men did that. We started body shaming women.
Yeah, facts.
When
She's flat, she ain't got no butt, she ain't got this. Yeah.
Facts.
Yeah.
And so then when we start putting the woman with the big breasts and the big butt on the music video saying that this is what we want, on the reverse,
she shaped like a Coke bottle.
Facts.
Yeah.
And so on the reverse, what we're doing is we're body shaming the other women who don't have it.
Wow.
So that's the first thing. We did that. And so then now you've got this cosmetic surgery, and everybody is wanting to change their body structure with this cosmetic surgery.
Yeah.
The thing about it is even the people who get the cosmetic surgery are still not happy after they get the cosmetic surgery.
They still try to get more work done.
They still get more work done because they're still not happy with themselves.
Wow.
Because they still they think that it's a physical thing, and they don't understand that it's a mental thing. They'll never be happy with themselves. That's why they change. That's why you see a lot of people with all these cosmetic surgeries on their face. That's why Michael Jackson had so many surgeries on him. It's because they thought that it was physical, but it's really mental. And they're not dealing with their emotions. They're not dealing with what their thoughts about who they are and what they feel about themselves. They have this, thought of I'm not good enough and I'm not this and I'm not that. If you really go through your that thought process and process through your thoughts and your emotions, you're not good enough for who? You're not good enough for what? Who are you comparing yourself to?
That's right.
Right? You're not that person. You're you. And how do you be the best you? And so that's why I always encourage people, if you process and feel through your emotional experience, it'll start to trigger your brain. It'll start to trigger your brain to get into this place of, more positive thinking patterns. Yeah. You'll start to believe in yourself. You'll start to now experience your internal self and who you are. Yeah. It's like if you ever lost your keys, the first thing somebody ever tell you,
where's the last place you saw it?
Where's the last place you saw it? Why they say that? Because if you go back and you backtrack, it more than likely would trigger your brain the last place where you left your keys. That's how thoughts are. You have these negative thoughts. You got this emotion about it. Let me backtrack because I got this uncomfortable emotion, like I'm stressed out or I'm anxious. All right, what thoughts am I having regarding this anxiety that I have? Oh, well, I'm thinking, they're gonna judge me when I walk in. Everybody gonna look at me when I walk in there. Okay, so what? Everybody's gonna look at you. What's the problem with that? They're gonna judge me. What they gonna say about you? I don't know what they're gonna say about me. Oh, okay. So if they judge you, how do you know it's not gonna be a positive thing? Yeah. Why are you resorting to something negative? Right? And so now you start backtracking and finding those keys that we call positive thoughts.
This is good. Anxiety and fears. And right now too, man, gender wars, again, is something that's just dominating our social conversations, all of that. Your point earlier, average Black man currently is making underneath 50K.
Yeah.
How do we properly try to have a good relationship dynamic between a man and a woman, even if that Black man is making less than his woman? Like, let's say he's making less than 50K and she's a doctor, she's making 200K. How can she still respect him, his masculinity as a man, and he respect her femininity as a woman, although she's making more than him?
It's ego. We've got to deal with our ego states. What's giving us that thought that we base a man's value on his income? What is it in a man that's making him think that he can't accept the help from his woman? Yeah. Right? Yeah. And so we've got to deal with those mental states. We got to deal with those thoughts that we have. We've got to come out of that because, again, it's about vulnerability. Yeah. Everybody wants to be strong and nobody wants to be vulnerable.
Yeah. One time, man, one of our sessions, I remember you said it's not about being a strong leader, but rather a controlled leader. And I was like, man, that is crazy. How can we be better control leaders as men and not be so focused on always trying to be, I got to be strong, I have to be fearless, but instead acknowledging, hey, I might feel somewhat scared, but I'm gonna still control my emotions, control myself. How do we try to go about that?
So when it comes to the more you practice experiencing
Right.
your emotions and confronting and being upfront with your emotions,
Yeah.
the more manageable the emotion experience becomes. Emotions are like this ocean wave. Parasailers, surfers don't try to stop. They can't stop a wave, and they know they can't stop an ocean wave. So what do?
We gotta ride.
They learn how to ride it.
Come on. Yeah.
Until it eases out.
Yeah.
We've got to learn how to ride our emotional experience. If you're scared, say there's fear, say you're scared.
Yeah.
If you're anxious, say that you're anxious. Sometimes just bringing it out to the forefront is you inviting that emotion to eventually just even out or leave. And so you got to bring it out to the forefront. A lot of times we have this desperate need to escape behaviors. So we engage in we have this desperate need to escape emotions. So we engage in maladaptive behaviors just to escape the emotion. Substance abuse, porn and sex addiction, domestic violence, infidelity, things like that. And so we do things like that just to ease ourselves and try to get rid of this emotional experience instead of just feeling it, instead of just acknowledging that we have it. And so part of that is building your ability to form the language around emotion.
It's therapeutic though. It is. For everybody. Come on, I'm telling you. Look, complimentary, huh? Marcus, man, I love sports, and I think we can study our athletes with our people through sports, right? Because especially when it comes to the social structure, we always got white owners. 9 times out of 10, it's black athletes doing all the sweat equity, in the words of Dr. Claude Anderson. And I think certain athletes I find so interesting, whether it's Jack Johnson, O.J. Simpson, where you see certain athletes at their apex. And then when it comes to marriage and dating, they go towards white women, right? Jack Johnson, during his time, early 1900s, knocking out white men and pissing them off when he's walking away with golds in his mouth and a white woman in a nice car. O.J. Simpson, Hertz commercials, talking about the juice, Heisman with the Buffalo Bills, 2,000-yard rusher, killing it, right? And going home, at first, a black woman, but later in life, white woman.
Right.
And now I see kids, whether they're at Ole Miss, UGA, SEC schools, after the games, they're going to the white girls. Not all, but very good number, a significant amount. Why do you think our black athletes are so attracted and marry white women? Do you think that is like a deep psychological issue there?
It is. And I believe that over time, having a white spouse was an archetype of affluent, being affluent, of affluency, right?
For sure.
So when you gain wealth, you deal with white people. Think about this. Even outside of spouses, there's a certain point to where we get to in our lives where we start making more money. And a lot of times people say, you know what, I can't deal with the black businesses, man, because they be on this. I got to go deal with the white people. And so it's a certain level of we've had this thought indoctrinated in our psyche that dealing with anything white is affluent or speaks to being proper, or speaks to being formal, or things like that. And so we've got to transition our mindset, and we've got to transition our mindset, and we've got to start reconceptualizing how we see the black experience.
I love that, the black experience. Right now, do you ever see us getting our stuff together as a people? And I know that could be like a broad question, because I think sometimes us as Black people, Black Americans, we think that we aren't good enough. However, we've done amazing things and we still are doing amazing, great things. But do you ever see us at a point where, when it comes to economically, socially, where we are back on track and not always, to your point of feeling like I got to spend with white companies more than Black companies sometimes?
I think that we will get to that place.
Yeah.
I think that we've already started the paradigm of getting to that place.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm saying this from my experience, because I'm seeing more and more people in our community come to therapy.
Yeah.
I'm seeing more and more people in our community ready to open up and ready to have and ready to be vulnerable. There's more and more Black men that are ready to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I think that we're starting to ride that and turn that corner of getting to a place. We just got some things that we still need to deal with. And we've got some things that we still need to heal from.
For sure.
And things like that. And
Yes,
it's a slow turn.
Yeah.
But we're slowly starting to bend the arc of coming to our senses.
As a therapist in the South too, it's the Bible Belt, right?
Yeah.
Everybody goes to church.
Yeah.
And I'll say even 15 years ago, if you even mention the word therapy, what's wrong? All you gotta do is pray, go to church, talk to the pastor.
Yep.
Do you ever think we can blend the church with therapy? Because I think so often, especially with the grandparents and the grandmas, just pray about it, talk to the pastor, opposed to, let me get you to a Black therapist. Who would you like to talk to? Opposed to always saying, I'm gonna just pray about it.
There could certainly be an integration of psychology and theological thought. When the Apostle Paul talks about, in Romans, when he talks about renewing your mind and transformation. In psychology, we call that cognitive restructuring.
Wow.
We could take a lot of, I truly believe there's nothing, when people say that there's nothing new in the Bible, there's nothing new. God understood psychology.
That's a fact. Yeah.
Right. He was the master of it.
That's right. Yeah.
So can there be an integration? There certainly can be an integration. There certainly are parallels that you could take in whatever VSL or version of standard living that anybody uses from any religious belief, right? And connect that with therapeutic intervention.
Yeah.
Therapy is not a doctrine that molds a person to a doctrine. Therapy is a space where you take wherever you are in your life, and in your life space, we help you to mold and structure that into a place where you're aligning yourself with what you value.
It's good talk right there, man. Suicide rate, especially amongst Black men, if you look it up, number one, unfortunately. Why is that, Marcus? And we can point to systemic racism, we can point to daily pressures of performing, but why is it that when it comes to Black men and our suicide rate, why are we always at the top of that list?
So that is actually a nuanced change. At the top of the list were actually white men, 60 and older.
Wow.
There was, I posted a study on one of these social media sites, and a lot of people got mad at me. But it's an actual study. It was a study not only showing that the rates suicide rates among Black men have increased, but this particular study between Boston University and Howard University was a study, a suicide study on women, and they showed that Black women have actually exceeded the risk, have come to at a higher risk than white women for suicide.
Wow.
Which is really alarming to me. Yeah. Because that didn't used to happen. In fact, when it came to suicide, Black women sat at the lowest on the when it came to suicide risk, Black women sat at the lowest on the totem pole. As far as anybody in any other race, any other gender. Yeah. Black women sat at the lowest on the totem pole. That's really alarming to me. Right? The increase in Black men was alarming to me when it comes to suicide risk. Part of it is I think was COVID. I think part of it was COVID. And this is why. This is why I think that. COVID made the human race come to a realization. All human beings come to a realization. See, we went to work. We go to work every day. We go work out at the gym. Yeah. We go out. We hit the club. Whatever. Yeah. Same routine.
It stops.
Right.
It's like nothing matters.
Yeah. We could attend to our business. Yeah. We could suppress our emotional experience and attend to our business. COVID said, everybody sit down.
And sit still.
Sit still.
Yeah.
So then as people start sitting with their thoughts and their emotions, and they're like, oh, wait. Oh, I don't know how to deal with this. I don't know why I'm even thinking like this. And so even then you had the highest rates of major depressive disorder. Yeah. You had the highest rates of generalized anxiety disorder. You had higher rates of psychotic breaks. During COVID, I was a director of intake assessments at a psychiatric hospital. Wow. And I would see all of this at the front door. Wow. I got all of this at the front door. You had increased rates of addiction and things like that. And so COVID did it to us because COVID made us sit down and people start paying more attention to their emotions and their emotional experience, and they didn't know how to deal with it.
Jesus. COVID, that did, to your point, a huge number on us. And instantly, Marcus, I thought about something else. The crack epidemic, in the 80s. That impact of seeing people who became children from that. And those children are now turning almost into grandparents now, or late 40s, early 40s, late 30s. When it comes to our community, what type of impact when it comes to our psychosis, our minds, our behaviors did the crack epidemic have on us as a people in the 80s?
So what you had was you had a lot of youth who, a lot of children at that time born crack addicted, fetal alcohol syndrome, and other developmental disabilities. Yeah. Not only did you have that, but now what we understand is addictive disease. There's a genetic disposition to addictive disease. Wow. And so what does that mean? Before I finish, let me tell you what I mean by that. What that means is it's sort of like there's a genetic predisposition to heart disease. So I'm going to use that as an example, right? What that means is that it draws you closer to the disease. It doesn't say that you are going to have it. It's not saying that you are going to be addicted, but what it says is if you decide to eat a cheeseburger and fries every single day, it brings you are more at risk of getting heart disease than all other people who don't have that genetic predisposition. Same thing with addiction. The genetic predisposition brings you closer to actually having the disease of addiction. And so what happened was you had the crack epidemic and we had the Ritalin epidemic.
Yeah, come on. That's right.
Kids started getting diagnosed with ADHD. Yep. They start giving them Ritalin. Research studies have shown that youth who were prescribed Ritalin turned out when they got older and became adults had drug addictions. And so that's what happened. 80s, if you think about 80s babies, and I would even say early 90s, were guinea pigs to a process. Things changed over time, but they were guinea pigs to a process. Yeah. And so what happens is you had this whole system of families being affected by these epidemics. It became a disease. Addiction became a disease when they found that more white people was using drugs. Yeah. That's when it became a disease. It's been a disease, but now we're gonna recognize it, right? It was criminal back then, but now it's a disease.
Crisis, now it's a crisis.
The opioid crisis now, right? But the one thing we're not talking about is the one thing we're not talking about is the fact that we need to still recover from when y'all was calling it when y'all was criminalizing drug addiction.
Yeah,
we
war on
still need to
drugs.
recover because it's people's kids and kids who have drug addictions.
Wow. That is heavy right there. And us as Black children too, because people see fathers, but those same fathers, they're somebody's son. That same
Yes.
mother, that's somebody's daughter, right?
Exactly.
For our Black people who deal with a parent that may be bipolar, maybe schizophrenic, how do we deal with our parents having mental health issues?
I say this, I get this question a lot. And I think one of the things is you open the door, but you let them decide to walk through it. The more you press, and especially for somebody who may be experiencing the symptomology of a diagnosis, maybe they have been diagnosed. The more you press them, the more they feel vulnerable, the more less of themselves that they feel. And so you have to make sure that you provide empathy. I can't imagine, going through what you're going through and going through this experience and how you feel. That's empathy, right? And what can I do? What can I do to best support you? Like, is there anything I could do to best support you? Or, you know what? I've got some resources that might be able to help you, that may be able to help you out. Would you be interested in those resources? Things like that. So, because oftentimes what we do in our community, let me tell you, our world, we could be rough on each other in our community. And we can, you know what, you need to go to therapy. Well, how do you think that person just received that? As therapy is something where crazy people go. I need to go to therapy. What you trying to say? I'm crazy? You need medication. Wow, what? You really gonna do that? Here, I went and got this therapist for you. You need to go see it. And so we've got to come out of that, and we've got to give people the free will and the choice to make the decision to ultimately come to that. People, we've got to realize that in our community, just because you go to therapy doesn't mean that you're crazy. In fact, when we say crazy, what we mean is people are below baseline functioning, right? I can't treat you in therapy if you're below baseline functioning or what you deem to be crazy. I can't treat you. You need a higher level of care anyway. So coming to therapy does not mean that you're crazy. Coming to therapy mean that you want to get healed and become whole. Or you want to change your insight because you're having a difficult time viewing things in your mind a certain way. And so maybe it's making you stagnant. And so that's what therapy is about.
Wow.
If you're to a place where you're below baseline or what we call crazy, psychiatric hospitals are for that. But again, there's nothing wrong with you going to do that. You go to the doctor if you got bronchitis, you get a cut on your wrist. Why can't you go to the doctor if you're mentally cut? Or you have a mental health condition that's affecting you and you can't seem to move forward in your life? There's nothing wrong with doing that.
This is great, man. Chad Johnson, he was one of my favorite football players growing up, played receiver, of course. And I remember Chad, he was on Nightcap, probably say a month ago. And hearing him talk about his mother and his grandmother, to this day, he breaks down in tears. And he referenced this one episode. It was Marriage Boot Camp, but it was like Family Edition or something like that on WeTV, and this was years ago. And he talked about that clip. I went back, I looked up that exact clip, and basically Chad's mom was a severe alcoholic his entire life. And in that moment, Chad and his mother were just going at it, and Chad, he was just heartbroken because he was like, do you even love me? And it's crazy because I'm like, Chad now I think it's like 46, but in the league, he was this happy-go-lucky guy. Even till this day, Chad, he's the type on Twitter, he'll go back and forth with people. He's put up to people's homes to play FIFA, to play Madden. And I'm like, he's such a happy guy. And he's a Capricorn. Our birthdays are like 2 days apart. And sometimes I can see myself in Chad. He's a happy dude. He's always life for the party. However, I'm like, dang, I didn't know on the inside he was dealing with all of that stuff,
Mm-hmm.
which then made me think about this conversation of so many Black men are walking around who are smiling, but deep inside, they're dealing with the most stuff, especially when it comes to Black men who may not have a nurturing mother.
Mm-hmm.
What impact does that have on us as men on our everyday walk throughout life of not having a nurturing mother? Because seeing him at 46 saying, "Do you still love me?"
Mm-hmm.
Like, man,
Issues with our mother can rock our foundation.
wow.
We talk about dads all the time,
Right,
and dads not being in
exactly.
our lives.
Exactly.
Dads teach us, like I said before, they help us
Yeah.
in that developmental stage of trusting other people.
Right.
Because we come out of our mother.
Mm.
When we come out, we like, who this guy? I know her, who this dude?
Yeah.
Right? And so we build that relationship.
Yeah.
Issues with our mother can shake our very foundation.
Wow.
If I used to see Chad all the time, because I'm from Cincinnati.
Oh, wow.
So
that's
I used to
crazy.
see Chad all the time.
Hey, that's
Matter of fact,
synchronicity.
if you know Chad, and if you know Chad Johnson, you see Chad. If you ever seen Chad at like lounges and clubs,
Yeah.
Chad drinking a Red Bull. That's Chad. I used to see Chad all the time.
That's crazy.
And so that issues with our mother can rock our very foundation because it is so, that is our root. That's the root that we come from.
Yeah.
We're the plant that comes from the root.
Wow.
And so our mother's our root. And so that can shake our very foundation. And that could be really tough. and not only is he experiencing grief, he's experiencing regret, he's experiencing resentment.
Yeah.
That can be a lot. And so what happens is when we experience a lot of things, we hold those things, we suppress those things in.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, our brain can't but help to deal with it. If there's a term that we call dissociation.
Mm-hmm.
Dissociation is when our brain is experiencing an inordinate amount of stress or trauma, it shuts down. There are what you I guess you would call more common things that happen in our lives that may lead to dissociation. You ever sat at work and daydream?
Yeah.
You ever drove home and don't remember the ride home?
Yeah. Just zoned out.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Just zoned out. And so it that happens because your brain shuts down when there's an inordinate amount of stress or trauma that happens to it. And so people can be over the top happy, over the top, just it's a code to cover up what they're feeling internally. And so we're displaying that code because we don't want to look vulnerable in front of people. We want to look strong. We want to look resilient. And so we don't deal with those emotions. And it is a process dealing with those emotions. We get scared to cry. We get scared to feel those really uncomfortable emotions, but it's really about transitioning that experience. We've got to get out of affective polarization, calling emotions good or bad. Emotions are just what they are. Some of them are uncomfortable, some of them are comfortable.
Wow.
When we call emotions good or bad, we get so desperate in wanting to feel good that we run from what's bad.
Wow.
Let me smoke a joint when I feel bad. Let me drink. Let me have a shot, couple of shots when I temporary Band-Aid.
Yeah.
We call that experiential avoidance because you're avoiding the experience of emotion.
The man behind you is a man that I've looked up to since high school, early middle school, really. Nipsey Hussle, right? And knowing of everything that he stood for. But I think Nip's situation highlights Black men's mental health, right? Because the man, unfortunately, who killed him, we've seen a similar situation with a lot of influential Black people, right?
Yes.
Where, unfortunately, we are taken out. And I think in that situation, it's tough because seeing a dope individual grow up in the most political, violent type of climate, especially when we talk about South Central LA, where it's down to colors, it's down to where you from, what street you from. And seeing him survive through that and make it through that component to then on a Sunday where you're relaxed and you're stopping by to help out somebody else, your life, it can end off of jealousy.
Yep.
We have so many black men in prison off of 10-second decisions, off of jealousy, whether it's about a woman, whether it's about you got more than me, you cooler than me.
Yep.
What do you think drives us as black men sometimes to where we can make a split-second decision and be willing to spend the rest of our lives in prison off of jealousy, hatred, and things like that?
Oftentimes, black men can feel so low about themselves that we wonder how the next black man can think so highly of himself. We can't conceptualize how the next man can think that highly about himself. Who does he think he is?
That's what you're going through, Zay.
You know? And so Nipsey thought highly about himself. Think about Nipsey Hussle for a second. This dude thought so highly of himself that he put himself out there. Did his own independent.
Yeah.
Where is he? This dude a legend now.
Yeah.
He a legend.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
His music. People still rock this man music.
Yeah.
All the way over from west to the east.
Yeah.
And so that's how highly that man thought of himself. And he said, I got enough of this that it's overflowing out of me that everybody else can bring their cup and get some of this water.
Wow.
He had enough of that. And this man said, who he think he is? How he think that highly about himself? He got to do the same thing that I do. He got to go to the bathroom the same way. He bleed the same way that I bleed.
Why is he so special?
Right.
Yeah.
He put Nipsey so far on a pedestal that he made Nipsey a superhero. And he said, I could take down a superhero. And that's what happens is we put each other on a pedestal and say this guy's a superhero instead of humanizing him. Because if we humanize him, he could say, you know what, I could do that too.
Wow.
We get so envious and jealous that we overlook the next man's purpose. We don't feed off of the next man's purpose. He didn't realize that Nipsey went through pain. You didn't think about that?
That's right.
He went through pain and he had to pivot. Pain is the test. Pivoting is the answers to the test.
Wow.
And your purpose is the testimony, because it's the testimony that tells the next person going through pain that they too can pass the test of pain. But he didn't see that. He didn't see Nip's purpose. And so he's seen this man that he idealized as a superhero. And he said, I could take that superhero down. That's the way I could feel good and feel high about myself.
Wow. Wow. That's heavy, man. And death, how do we deal with death? Because often I think about, so of course, you know, everybody talks about Malcolm, everybody talks about Martin, everybody talks about Nip, but what people don't talk about is each of those men also had a life partner, a woman.
Yeah.
They had children, they had brothers, they had sisters, they had uncles, aunts. As black families, how do we properly deal with death and mourning, where some of us feel like we got to go back to work instantly. Some people feel like, I don't want to go back to anything. So how do we find like that fine line in between that when it comes to properly mourning?
We've got to feel and experience all the emotions that we have. When we talk about grief, grief is a loaded emotional term because there's a whole slew of emotions and thoughts that come with grief. We grieve because we still have love in us for that person that we have not yet experienced. And now that person is gone. And so now we've got to figure out how to let it go and let it out. And so one of the things that I do is what you call a Gestalt technique in therapy. Is I tell people, whenever you're grieving, write down your regrets, resentments, and appreciations of that person.
Wow.
Once you're finished writing it down, I want you to just go, I have them just go over it for as long as possible. And then when you're done, take it and burn it. The reason I do that is because it helps people to process what they feel. All those unresolved emotions that you have regarding that experience. Death can be a traumatic event. How do we handle death? Feel through it, because the reality of it is you're gonna be sad. You should be. You're gonna be hurt. You should be. You're gonna miss that person. You should miss that person. Feel all of it. Don't avoid it. Feel all of it. Everybody gets sad. It's okay to cry. It's okay to let all of that go. Feel through it. Everybody got all these techniques and all these processes, and they gonna give you step by step. I got all that too. I got a whole load of that. I could give you that. But my short answer, feel it. Let it go.
Yeah. Wow. Our Black fathers who's tuning in, let's say they're dealing with custody battles. How do they properly nurture their Black sons, even though that Black son might be connected to a mother who doesn't love the father and they're split? How do you properly navigate that of trying to be a father, but then you're still dealing with custodial rights? You're still dealing with going back and forth with the moms, which I see with a lot of young Black men. How do they properly try to navigate that space?
I deal with a lot of guys in therapy who deal with that very situation.
Right.
And what I tell guys is don't let the process disrupt you from feeding your son support, empathy, and love.
Yeah.
What does that mean? And they always, I only get on once a weekend. Then you give all that you got
for that
that weekend.
Got you.
I'm proud of you. I love you. This is what I feel about you.
Yeah.
You feed them every moment that you get. They can't, it's maybe out of your power when a judge is gonna grant you visitation. It's out of your power how much child support you got to pay.
Yeah.
It's out of your power that because this woman is not letting you get involved with your son. But the moment that you're able to sit with them and to speak to them, you feed them and you speak life into them.
Yeah.
And you give it you give it everything you got in that moment.
Hey, that's good tools right there, man. Because again, to your point, it's so many young Black men dealing with those type of things. Another thing is too of mental health. We are in this age now where kids are talking about mental health or mental health days at a very young age. However, though, I also hear complaints from employers or my parents or other people. Hey, these kids, they a little too soft though. How can we balance mental health and saying, it's my mind today, with also still being a control leader of knowing I still have to get things done. I can't just not show up to my final exam because mentally I'm not there today. I can't just show up to my job for 3 weeks because I don't feel like it or I feel anxious. How do you still properly fight through those negative emotions sometimes?
You teach the proper way of utilizing resiliency.
Resiliency, that's good.
You teach them resiliency and you teach them self-efficacy. We've got to teach our youth how to be efficacious in themselves.
Yeah.
Right? Have confidence in yourself.
Yeah.
Let's manage. All right. Let's manage this emotion. Schools have health education, but they don't have mental health education.
Facts.
You know, they don't teach our youth how to regulate their emotion. You could give them sex education, but not emotion education.
Wow.
You're going to talk to them about sex, but sex is a frontal lobe. Sex is a frontal lobe function before it's a physical function. Let's teach them how to process, think through it, and feel their emotions before we start talking to them about how to use a condom. We talk so much in schools about sexual prevention, but not emotion regulation.
Wow. You're not lying though, man, because that is a very dangerous thing. You could be in the 5th grade learning about sex, but I don't know how to deal with these different emotions. As a Black male therapist, what challenges have you faced in your space?
you know, it's whenever I do, because I do a lot of education, I do a lot of advocacy. And when I say I do those things, I don't work for no job. I don't work for nobody. I work for myself. And so whenever I do the education and advocacy, you know, it's a challenge. It's a challenge trying to, at times, help people understand the importance of mental health. That could be a challenge. It's a challenge helping people to gain access to care. There are times, you know, even in my practice where, you know, people don't have the insurance lapse or things like that, where, you know, they can't come to therapy. And so some, you know, depending on the situation, sometimes I just, you know what, don't worry about it, just come to therapy. Like I don't know how we're gonna I'll figure it out monetarily. I don't know. Like, but just come to therapy. You know, we'll do it. You know, and so there's times where I just take the hit. You know, but it's that challenge. We have to change the mental health infrastructure in across this country. It's got to change. It's got to be different. We've got to provide people access to care. You know, we've got to. You know, there's a lot of people in our community, in the Black community, that don't have access to care. And so we've got to figure out a way to get them access. And so that's a challenge. From a personal standpoint, your therapist see a therapist. I see somebody just because I need to release. I need to get to a place where, you know, I'm still human. I still got stuff I got to deal with. I still got emotions, you know, about things that I still got to process through. And I need a sounding board, and I need somebody to help me through it, right? You know, I still got, you know, I still have to have a life outside of the, you know, but I will say the other thing is in my spaces, you know, being a single Black man in dating, because everybody think I've gotten people think that I'm analyzing them.
I can see that.
Women think that I'm analyzing them. They, you know,
and you got all the secrets.
Correct. Correct.
Nah, for sure.
And even to this day, I've got some women who don't think that I have a manly job.
Wow.
You know, I don't. You know, so yeah. So
wow.
Those are some of the challenges.
That's crazy though, Marcus. He was had to laugh.
Absolutely.
Like he trying to save people.
Absolutely.
On, what?
Yeah, I've been told that.
So for other Black man therapists who could be possibly tuned in as Black male therapists, what words of encouragement do you have for them when it comes to even simple things like living and dating? Because I had no idea. Like that's an interesting perspective of women. Sometimes they'll think, oh, he's trying to psychoanalyze me. He's trying to break me down. So what words of encouragement, advice would you have towards other Black male therapists when it comes to living their lives freely and dating as well?
Simple. Be you.
Wow.
And know your purpose. And be confident that that is your purpose.
Wow.
The one thing about me is nobody's going to ever shake me off of this. I worked too hard to get here. And I enjoy being in this place. You know, so I'm not gonna let nobody knock me off of where I am. In fact, you know, my goal is to expand where I am and be more of an impact and be, you know, more of a pillar. You know, and where that takes me, you know, I have no fear in where that takes me, because I know that I'm doing what it is that I was meant to do in this life. And that's what I would say to other Black male therapists: be you and know your purpose and be confident in that purpose.
Yes, sir. Working Black men, for the Black men that's waking up early in the mornings to go clock in, the Black men who are entrepreneurs, business owners, what words of encouragement and tools do you have for them? Because sometimes it can be stressful of waking up. It's Monday morning. We at the top of the week. We got to start all over. We got to grind. And then when you come home, you got to be emotionally available for your wife, for your children. So what words of advice do you have for all the young brothers that's tuning in who's just grinding every day?
Stop identifying. Do not identify with your work. we often as men identify with our work, and that becomes the second wife. And so then our lady at home is like, you don't have no time for me. You know, we don't take time out for ourselves. We can overwork ourselves.
Yeah.
Take some time out. You know, for yourself and for your lady and for what's at home.
Yeah.
Know that you're working because you want to take care of home, and remember that home is important. Self-care, take care of yourself. Give yourself some space. Oftentimes we overwork because there's this increased amount of anxiety that we got to get it done, and it's got to happen, and it's, you know, it's got to get done. It's got to happen. But home's got to be taken care of, and people need your time. That's got to happen too. And so being proactive in self-care, and making sure you're taking care of your home base, because that's where you rejuvenate. Yeah. Right? You want to take care of where you get your energy from. And your energy source. Yeah. And that's home.
Marcus, this interview, it was a classic, one of my favorites, man. I only got 2 more questions for you before we wrap. School to prison pipeline, that's a real thing, as we know. To your point, the kids, like what we talked about at the very beginning, which circulates with this, starts off with ADHD diagnosis, misdiagnosis, to your point. They get on that Ritalin, which then can invert them to drugs, and then that can lead to criminality with the peer pressure that starts in school, then that leads to the corners. Those same brothers, unfortunately, brightest minds like a Malcolm X can end up in prison. How do we make sure that those brilliant minds, once they leave prison, aren't victims of recidivism and going back into those cells, but instead being leaders, legends, productive members of society?
One of the things we need to recognize is post-incarceration syndrome. Our you know, the field of mental health is still not recognizing post-incarceration syndrome. And the reason being is because what they realize is if they recognize it, they're going to have to go back and deal with all of those inmates that they released from prison. And figure out a way to get them services. Post-incarceration syndrome is real. Connecting those men who and women who are incarcerated with mental health resources. It's important that we connect them and bridge the gap of mental health resources, just because the reason is because when they get out of jail, they've gone through this process of this mixed emotional bag. You got to show respect, but you can't trust. You got to deal with this power dynamic of if you say something, this person can put you in segregation. You got to deal with somebody stealing your commissary. Somebody trying to extort you or bully you. People fighting and seeing somebody catch a beat down. You deal with all of those things. Scarface had a song, "Never Seen a Man Cry Till I Seen That Man Die." And on his first verse, he just that little snippet of a verse, he talked about it. And he said, he talked about the man being released. Now he got a chip on his shoulder. Now he's angry. And so what'd he do? He can't find a job. He can't do nothing. So he go back out and he go murder and rob somebody. He do the same thing that he did when he went in. And so we've got to start connecting people to mental health services when they're released. Post-incarceration syndrome is real. And we have to start recognizing it and dealing with the impact of it when people are released from prison.
This is great, man. Very last question, Marcus. Hearing you talk about Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, you know, as a therapist, hearing you even mention that name, it's just so refreshing, right? When did you find self-awareness as a Black man and also as a Black male therapist?
You know, before I got into being a therapist, what I realized is, working in psychiatric hospitals and working in different sectors, what I realized is that black people we have our own experience in these sectors. And oftentimes treatment goes missed because people don't understand us. They don't understand our experience. They don't understand what we're going through. And that got my mind on the track of, man, we got to reshape this for our community. We got to do something different. We've got to figure out, racial trauma. We've got to figure out how to deal with past traumas. We got to figure out how to heal ourselves. Before, we were, and I believe at one point Dr. King said this, and when he realized that after integration, what he realized was we gotta integrate we gotta heal before we start integrating ourselves. And I believe it was Tavis Smiley book, who said that Dr. King said that I believe I've led my people into an abyss. Right? Because then he realized, like, hey, we haven't even healed yet. Now we starting to integrate. And so for me, I've always been big when it comes to our community. And I've done research on my own on Black pioneers in this community. Not too many people know that it was 30 Black psychiatrists that went to the American Psychological Association and posed to the Psychological Association to put bigotry in the DSM as a diagnosis.
That's crazy.
The American Psychological Association told them that it was premature for them to do that, right? Not too many people know that slaves who wanted to be free was diagnosed with what you call drapetomania.
That's true.
Right.
I forgot about that term. That's
how many people know that the American Psychological Association allowed for slave labor to be used as payment for mental health services? So, it's understanding those things and knowing that there needs to be some sort of reshaping and structuring of mental health in our community. That's what keeps me going. And knowing that I'm a part of this community, and I can't leave or forget where I came from and who I am.
Come on now, Marcus, man, I appreciate you so much for your time. On the way out, where can everybody book with you? The Black man who's interested in doing therapy, how can they book with you? How can they follow you, keep up with you, all that good stuff?
Awesome. You can find me on Psychology Today. I am on Psychology Today. You can email me at therapy@psychosocialcafe.com. My website is www.psychosocialcafe.com. You can find me as at the Psychosocial Cafe on TikTok, and on Instagram, you can find me as one Mark Lance.
Marcus, man, this was a legendary session, man. I appreciate you, brother. And look, we got to do this sometime again soon. So I appreciate you, man.
Definitely.
Yes, sir.
Definitely. Thank you.
That's a wrap. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Tap in with Marcus. Again, blessed be your host, Caleb Smith. Shout out to Sid and Zay. Until next time, peace.